keep in mind, like, I had just been at 70 miles an hour to zero like that. And multiple cars, another car spinning out. I mean, the scene was so chaotic, and it's shocking. I mean, I'm just driving up to, my friend's house, and I don't know when it happened, even though I remember some things, right, stepping out of the car and kind of surveying some of the parts of the scene that, again, I don't want to kind of get into, but I know that in my head, as I was standing, my dogs were in the car. My dogs are my children. I've never had two-legged. I've always had four-legged. And so I'm checking to make sure we're all okay. I mean, my car was just demolished. I'm not bleeding, but I am.
Welcome back to another episode of Code Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
I'm fine, Ray. How are you?
Good. Good to see you again, my friend.
Likewise.
We have a unique guest today, Nicole Hutchinson-Moore. Nicole was a formerly incarcerated inmate in the Texas Department of Corrections, charged with the crime of manslaughter before being paroled. Nicole, or Nikki, what do you like to be called? Nikki?
You've been calling me Nikki, so
I know. I like Nikki. I think that's a great name.
There
Nikki,
you go.
welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, ditto from me, Nikki, and I know there's more to you than, of course, the time you spent in prison and the accident, and we want to get up to that. But I know Ray wants to start out a little bit from your early days. So Ray, why don't you kick it in with getting a little bit of bio information from Nikki?
Nick, I think it's great to just get right into this here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what life was like before your arrest?
Sure, absolutely. So, and first off, I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to reaching, your audience and hopefully a different perspective. I talk a lot about humanity, the humanity of this, which leads into, I think, a good segue into kind of, my background. I'm here in Dallas, Texas, and I come from a very conservative, hardworking family. My father is a neurosurgeon, grew up in the Depression, was very self-taught, if you will, had a very normal childhood. He was an only child. And when I was about 13, however, the life that I had thought I had known was told that actually my father was really my grandfather. I had known I was adopted. I just didn't know I was adopted that closely within my family. And I had been raised with brothers and sisters who actually were my aunts and uncles, and one of them was my biological mother. So you can imagine at 12 years old, 13 when I found this out, after leading what was a pretty normal childhood here in Dallas, that was quite shocking and very difficult to process and deal with. And I loved my parents very much, but there'd always been a struggle. My dad had a pretty extreme temper. Things are a little different back then. I'm 50. So when I was raised, spanking and things like that were pretty, normal and commonplace, but he was old school style where it didn't matter what the belt was coming out. And, I was expected to adhere to a pretty high standard, that my parents wanted. They wanted the best for me. They were just much older, obviously. And I was the only child between the two of them. And my father, as I found out many, many years later, really saw me as kind of saving the family. He did not have a good relationship with his other children. They had kind of come and went, with the exception of one of my sisters who was with us. And sadly, she passed away from cancer in 2009 after a very courageous battle. And she had had two kids and had moved to Colorado and really started a beautiful life. And it was just very tragic. She was only 40 years old. And sadly, all my other brothers and sisters by, adoption, but by blood, my aunts and uncles, all passed away as well. There was a lot of trauma is a good word for it. And I know we kind of throw that around a lot, but it truly was a fractured, broken family. We had a facade, we had a mask, where we It really seemed like we were a good little threesome. And then, my mom, my dad, and me, and then my sister would join. There'd be four of us when she wasn't going back and forth to Colorado. But it was very traumatizing as a child. And I never really processed that. And I started acting out. I started misbehaving, things like smoking cigarettes, experimented with pot. In my family, that's not allowed. It just was not. There was a certain standard I had to meet. So my father, being a physician, he trusted the mental health, and this is back in the 80s, 1985 to be exact, and put me in a mental health institution. He was also concerned, obviously, because of his other children and the problems he'd had with them, that I was going down a very bad path. Unfortunately, that facility was raided by the FBI, something you know well, and was charged with racketeering and fraud, child abuse. And we were the initial settlement of about 30 of us, and about a $300 million settlement. It was unlike anything of its kind at the time. And I was sent from there once they bled the insurance dry. And I was in restraints. I mean, it was just torture. You're in restraints, you're tied down to a bed, you're 12 years old, you're being, Freudian with all these horrible thoughts and experimented on. Like, it was just terrible. And so they bled your insurance dry and then sent me to Provo Canyon School, which you may have heard of from Paris Hilton. She was there just a few years after me, but she's gone on a really amazing advocacy tour and sharing her story. And it's all true. She experienced, even a few years later after me, the same things that I experienced at Provo Canyon School, which is basically, a place that you were either court ordered to go. So it was a big disparity, or your parents could afford to pay for you to go. And it was supposed to be a reform type school. You've heard about the wilderness things and the survival camps and all that. This is all part of that big mess that was going on in the 80s and 90s. And it just fractured me further. Not only did I feel abandoned with this whole adoption thing and finding out the man that I thought was my dad is my grandfather, my sister's my mother. I mean, it's too much. I'm 12. Then I'm sent away and abandoned by my parents. And I was gone for 3 years. So from 13 to 16.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nikki, can I ask you a question? Because in my life, I found out about 4 years ago, I had a half brother before my father was married, way back in the late 1930s. DNA showed us I had a half brother, and we finally met up. And he said back in the day, parents didn't tell their kids they were adopted. And when he was about the same age you mentioned, 12 to 13, some neighborhood kids told him, "Oh, we heard they're not really your parents." What are you talking about? And neither of the parents were biologically related to him. He also had a brother to whom he was not biologically related, nor with his parents either. So he took it pretty hard. This is the half brother I only met 4 years ago. Unfortunately, he died about a year after we first realized we were related. But it was a very traumatic time for him, is what he said. And I know he had some ups and downs in those teens. I'm just curious. He found out by accident, and this may have been like in the early 50s or something. How did you actually find out that you were adopted? And
full story. We were at the hospital. My godparents, I have a second adopted family, if you will. My dad's medical school best friend. They've been friends for 70 years. They were like godparents to me, and one of their four daughters, I'm number 5, as they always call me, one of their 4 daughters had a baby, and we're sitting there in the hospital, and I'm looking through the glass, and I'd never been in a nursery at a hospital, never seen that. And I just looked up at my mom and I said, I want to know the truth. Because my sister would come in town and say things like, "I know who your mother is. I know who your mother is." I mean, just, typical sibling rivalry. And she was very jealous, understandably so, that I'm here living in Dallas and she's up there in Colorado, even though my dad wanted to bring her down. So there was a lot of things that led to that finally I was like, okay, there was enough bugs in my ear about it that I finally said, okay, I want to know the truth. And we had also moved from the home we'd lived in, my whole 12 years of my life. I had recently just lost my dog. So here we are in this like rental while the house is being built in another part of Dallas. And they tell me that news. So, it was a beautiful reason why I had asked that then turned. And it was immediately that my behaviors really escalated. My dad and I had always, bumped heads, and then everything would be great, and then we'd bump heads again. And I was a tough child to begin with. I was playing with the boys and riding bikes and crawling in rivers and streams and hunting and fishing and doing all that stuff. So I was pretty independent and tough already. And we had Hispanic help in the house, so I was speaking Spanish fluently already. I already felt a kindred spirit to that culture, being raised that way with my parents were doing stuff and working and all of that. So as a matter of fact, she was with us for 38 years. I call her Mama. I still talk to her today. But it was a very shocking thing to learn. So I can understand how that would be an interesting one for you as well. And then I found out at 35. I didn't find out until about 2008 or 9 who my biological father. I'd been told he was dead all these years. And once that beautiful thing called MySpace came around, I just Googled or I guess typed into MySpace, and a young man came up, like 16, 17, and his name was the same. And I was looking at my own eyes on the screen, and I just fell to the floor, and I knew it. I knew I had some kind of, come to find out, I have 9 half siblings on that side. Wow. And I've met 3 of them. Yeah. And they were just living down in the Corpus Christi area. I don't know if you're from Padre. Yep. Down at the coast in Texas. So, that was even more compounded. My whole story leading up to my final implosion of myself is all around that compounded trauma. It's one thing, we have things in our life that we deal with, but once you don't kind of deal with that and you have that fracture and that brokenness, and then now you're compounding the trauma onto that, and now another life event, something's happening and you're not getting the proper help for that. Boy, I mean, that's literally a ticking time bomb waiting to happen. And that's absolutely what happened to me. This whole time, though, as an adult, I left home at 18, threw a bag out the window, went to work in a call center, found out I was great in sales, and absolutely loved the phone. I loved selling to people. Give me New York. I would call New York, and I had a name. I was Nikki Scott. It's funny you call me Nikki. I was Nikki Scott, and I have an accent. I'd be like, I'm going to sell you some paper clips and staples. And it kept people on the phone, and they loved it. It was this total shtick, right? But all of a sudden, at 18, here I am, making all this money, and it was fun, and I was having a great time with it. So I was also at that age where the .coms were just kind of starting, AOL was coming around, telephony was really starting to evolve, and I had a propensity to kind of understanding that technology, but instead of going on the technical side, I gravitated towards the sales side with my personality and just really going after that, the thrill of that. And my dad was so proud. So, it was a really fun, but very trying career. I was involved in, like AT&T, Cisco, Avaya, all the big software companies. And then of course, as that graduated to the cloud, but there's a lot of drinking that goes on. There's a lot of hours that go on. There's about 200,000 miles a year of travel. So during that time, I met, married, divorced 3 or 4 times. I was moving a lot. I was, just constantly burning that candle. Like it was unbelievable. And here I am working, pretty much 7 days a week. But then in the evenings, I'm doing charity work. I was involved with some animal rescue. So, I mean, now, of course, looking back, I'm like, how did I even think I could manage, 1/10 of what I was trying to manage? Well, I wasn't. That's when my drinking really, kind of took hold as a mask and to protect that. Fortunately, I never really got involved in drugs besides, the experimenting thing when I was younger. But for me, it was the alcohol, and I had no treatment, no help. I had all these responsibilities, and the more money I made, the worse it got. The more success I had in my career life, my personal life started, tanking all the time. So it was just this hamster wheel of just constantly going and chasing.
This all led to a uneventful evening, and it just that snowball that was going down the hill. It just kept getting bigger and bigger, and you couldn't get out of the way of it. Tell us what it was that led you up to that fateful night.
So you got, and forgive me if I kind of tear up and kind of need a minute. I'm very emotional about it still to this day. So in 2015, I had just moved again. I had another breakup. As a matter of fact, I was married for a while to an assistant district attorney at the Dallas County office here. That was a lot of fun when my whole case happened. But at any event, so I was trying to get my feet under me. I was trying to start a business. I had finally left AT&T. I literally had a gun to my head one night and was writing a letter. My dad found me the next morning in the bathtub, drunk, the gun on the table and the letter. This was in about 2014. And at that moment, I hit my knees. I thought that was my low. I thought that was my lowest beyond my teenage years when I was, locked up in those places. I said, I never again, God, please, restore me, bring me through this. So I made some changes in my life. I got rid of all that social stuff I was doing, all of the red carpets, all of the nights out, all of this stuff, and really cut down my friend circle to what I thought was a small, good group of friends, cut back my drinking, made a lot of good changes, but it wasn't enough. And I never got the help for the trauma. So, I was kind of coasting, if you will, kind of that 2014 to 15 timeframe. And a friend, I had gotten to know some restaurant owners in Dallas close to my house. And there was a chef event where, it's like a battle of chef kind of thing. And I love food. So I was like, okay, now this is one I'm going to go to, because I really wasn't doing a lot at that time frame. I was really trying to get my head on. And I went, and there was some wine there, not much. You had tickets, so you could only have a couple. But their best friends won the awards. We ended up going over to their restaurant, having wine. But it was one of those things where you're like, okay, I'm okay to drive. It's really close to home. And so I got home, got into my feelings, and I called my husband now. Back then we weren't married yet. And basically, said, okay, I'm going to load up the dogs and come up there. Loaded my dogs into my SUV, packed my bag, and was headed up just a little bit north of Dallas to Plano. And not even 2 miles from my house, was coming around a corner on the highway in the left lane where there's no shoulder really or anything. It's just a barricade. And there was a street sweeper crew that was there. And multiple accidents all happened at the same time as mine and 2 others, as well as another DWI. And we don't know exactly the specifics, and it wasn't really investigated enough, other than a worker from the street sweeper crew, that they don't get out of their trucks. They just sweep, right? And there's a cushion truck that is behind them. Another car hit, and I couldn't stop. And apparently this gentleman was in the road, in the left lane of a highway, and I hit him. And
let me stop you right there. The gentleman's name is Bernard Armstrong. He was 60 years old. I just want to get his name out there.
So I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I can't, by law, and we can talk about that in a little bit, I can't say that. So thank you for honoring that. Because I can't, and I have to be a little bit careful what I say in the state of Texas with the requirements of speaking about or to or your victim. So,
and I didn't know that, by the way, but I just wanted to make sure for our listeners and our viewers' sake, we get that out there.
I appreciate that. And, the horror of this accident that happened is, whether I had been drinking or not, right? It was a horrible accident, and it was the wrong place at the wrong time. And for me to have alcohol in my system was just, first off, to make that choice to get in the car after I'd been out and did have alcohol and get behind the wheel and not think about that choice before I did that. But 2, you never know what's in front of you. You never know what you come across. And to have that burden on top of everything else, it's it's mind blowing. It was in an instant, everything changed for someone else's life and for my life. And, if there's any, hopefully, kind of some hope out of it all, was that I did something with the change out of mine, thank God, and fell to my knees in a very dark, dark place in the beginning. And then something in me snapped. I heard God literally pick me up from the back of my shoulders and say, "You're not going anywhere." Because I was ready to end it all again. Not too long before that, I'd already been suicidal. So at that moment, in my darkest moments, I literally felt that hand of God on me saying, "I'm not through with you, and you have an absolute purpose, and this is it." And I remember thinking, how can this be it? This is horrific. This is horrible. So many people have been impacted. And I'm a kind, nurturing, loving person by just nature. And to have that guilt and shame and blame that is, it's like a heavy cloak, the biggest fur, heavy cloak and veil that you can put on you. And it's on you 24/7. There's not a way to shake that. So for me, when that happened, the only way, and when I look back now, because of course now, fast forward almost 10 years, right? A lot has happened since then. But to have the pure faith at that moment that I was meant to be on this earth still, and to be grateful that, I was on this earth, was really the turning point in my life. And I really look at my life starting and everything that's happened since, even though I've had a lot of tragedy with losing my parents and my cousin and some other stuff, but I've had the most beautiful life, even with prison, all those things from that moment that happened to today, in retrospect, being able to see the person I've become today. And I believe we don't change as a person, but we evolve that. And so those things where the good was in me was pulled out, and where the things that were traumatizing and led me to make those awful choices to, find myself in that position, those things were, finally dealt with. And that's the criticalness. Like, we had to repair that broken child that I had just exacerbated and compounded that problem my whole life to, who I was, even with the accident, even living with that shame and blame and what I did and who I impacted and hurt, being able to bring that together as a whole and make me whole again.
Nikki, we can come back to all the things that you've done, and we want to hear about your time in prison, but we're a true crime podcast, and we bring up the good, the bad, and all the stuff in between. And I read some articles, and it seems like, and I'll try to be polite here, but at the scene, you were a little bit, shall we say, aggressive or assertive. And probably today they may have called you a Karen, but you said some things about your wealth, and the officers may be in trouble if they follow through with this. And just walk us through a little bit of that. And I know your lawyer made some comments after the fact, but just you experienced, I guess, next to Mr. Armstrong, the second worst thing that can happen to someone in life. He lost his life. You were driving the car, and we don't have to get any more graphic than that. But here you now are, you're brought out, the officers are talking to you. I've been one of those officers way back in the day. People can sometimes be antsy, and I'll be polite and say aggressive, but do you remember some of that discourse or conversation you were having and the after effect of it?
Yeah, I do. No, keep in mind, like, I had just been at 70 miles an hour to zero like that. And multiple cars, another car spinning out. I mean, the scene was so chaotic, and it's shocking. I mean, I'm just driving up to, my friend's house, and I don't know when it happened, even though I remember some things, right, stepping out of the car and kind of surveying some of the parts of the scene that, again, I don't want to kind of get into, but I know that in my head, as I was standing, my dogs were in the car. My dogs are my children. I've never had two-legged. I've always had four-legged. And so I'm checking to make sure we're all okay. I mean, my car was just demolished. I'm not bleeding, but I am out of it. I'd never had a concussion before. I had a concussion. So it's kind of choppy, bits and pieces, but I've never known the kind of shock. I've known survival shock from teenage years, but I've never known like trauma, physical, real world shock until that moment. I also, I have a lot of police officer friends. I work with the police departments now, do all of those things. I know that what was said is somewhere in the middle. What I was saying and what the cops were saying I was saying, it's somewhere in the middle there. I don't really think that's as important. That's salacious, and that's what people love to troll me about or come at me and say horrible things. Let them. Okay, fine. You can say whatever you want, sit in judgment of me all day long. But the bottom line is, no, I did not behave any way normal, not only because of my physical, what had happened to me physically, but also just trying to process and understand. I didn't know until the next morning that I'm the one that hit him. Nobody told me. Nobody told me. And there's multiple cars. I mean, honestly, we still don't know to this day really what transpired. I do know that my behavior and acting, I hate to use that word because I know a lot of great Karens, but that's the word people use. But acting like a Karen was absolutely instrumental. My attorney looked at me and said, you screwed up your case when you treated the cops the way you did. Period. End of story. Doesn't matter what we do, what we research, you screwed it up. And I'm sitting there like, huh? I mean, this is my first taste in the criminal justice system too. And I'm like, well, that can't be right. It needs to be legit. Okay, if I did it, I did this. If I did this, nope, doesn't matter. So to your point, that was very pivotal because it also taught me that this can get you in a lot of trouble, and how it's interpreted and what we
So
say.
Can this.
Absolutely.
If you're only listening, I'm typing on a keyboard. That can get you in trouble too. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And so again, I think it was somewhere in the middle. None of it was appropriate, but also some of it was, in now as I understand it, just the shock and things that were happening in the accident. It was highly chaotic. I mean, the highways were shut down. This is just a couple miles from my home. I didn't see it coming. I mean, it wasn't like I was, and it doesn't make any difference. I'm accountable. I was wrong, period. So circumstances, this is when I laid down and said, the circumstances don't matter. We don't need to hire investigators. We don't need to do all this stuff. Whatever the cops say, I did it. I did, done. Now, what are we going to do to make this right? Right. And then there was a civil case afterwards that was dismissed. And again, I don't want to get into the details out of respect, but there's just so many mitigating factors here. I think what's so important for people to realize looking at me, you can think about me whatever you want to. I'm secure in who I am and what I do today. But it could be you. It could be you. We
That's
make
true.
that one instant choice. And this is what I learned about, prison. And when I talked in the very beginning here about humanity, you just don't know until it happens to you. And then you're able, I've been able to have the blessing to look backwards and go, okay, well, why did it? Like you guys kind of teed it up here in the beginning saying, okay, let's lay a little groundwork here. That's good and well, but I had to actually go back and do the hard work to undo all of that led me to make that choice. Are you kidding me that I'd ever get in a vehicle? I don't care if it's even somebody has a sip, a drop. No. And I tell all my friends and say, listen, it's so important. It doesn't matter what your intoxication level is. Anything, pot, everybody's smoking pot and doing that kind of stuff, which I don't condone either, but anything that alters your mind. I mean, we do it on prescription drugs, right? So it says warning label, do not operate machinery. It should be a 0. There should be no tolerance, none. This 0.08 stuff and all that, but I'll get off on a tangent on that. But at any event, mine is a cautionary tale, a very cautionary tale. I never would have put my dogs in the car. I never would have packed that bag. The mindset I had back then, I was okay to drive, right? I'm never okay to drive when you're drinking. But before I educated myself and was educated by others, in my mind, I was just going over to my boyfriend's house. No big deal. I'm not going far, what have you. So I hope that there is some semblance of understanding that, we are a choice and a decision, and a lot of times away from finding ourselves in that position. And the choices and the decisions we make are so critical and important to make them out of a rational place, not a place of any type of intoxication, not a place of any anger. You have a fight with your boyfriend, you get in your car and you're texting and driving and you hit somebody. I mean, it's insert any kind of thing. When you have the responsibility and the power of that vehicle and those around you, their lives at your hands, there should be nothing that distracts you from doing that. But the bigger picture was, I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't, oh, I'm okay. And I'm not seeing the bigger picture of, oh my gosh, the consequences of if something goes wrong of what I'm doing is exactly what I'm living right now.
Well, let me ask you this, Nikki. We've been talking about a lot of things, but in a sense, did you really even care? Number one. And number two, were you kind of on a pathway of destruction anyways? Weren't you, because of your stature within society, that you were kind of like, I'm above this, I can't be touched? I mean, hey, I was married to a DA or an ADA hey, people think that. I mean, there's cops out there that actually think, because I'm a law enforcement officer, you can't touch me. Did you have that kind of feeling? And then a second part of this, what was the pivotal moment, even if you had that feeling, that changed you? Because what you were then and who you are now are two different people. You're really different. And everybody likes this Nikki so much better than the old Nikki, or maybe other people like the old Nikki, but I think you like this Nikki better than the old Nikki. And I think I'd like to know, what was the pivotal moment? Was it that God was able to grab you, or was it the hearing? Was it your arrest? Was it when the judge passed down sentence? What was it that kind of changed you and kind of put you on the right path?
Well, it's real simple. I live with the fact that I destroyed somebody in their family, and I live with that every single day. Yeah. And I wasn't a bad person before this happened. I wasn't a Karen. I wasn't somebody that thought I was above people. Quite frankly, my parents were really strong on us that, my dad earned, we weren't like the other people I went to school with. I went to all these private schools and all that stuff that, like, I had to earn my allowance. I had to do IOUs. I'm not a trust fund baby. I didn't have any, money from my dad coming in. I went to work and I made it on my own. My dad never co-signed for me. I bought my own home. I did all that stuff on my own. Hence why I threw the bag out the window and left at 18 too, was to say, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show you I can do it. I'm supposed to go to a big college and do all that stuff, and I didn't. So to answer that is, number one, that's real simple. I have the burden. I mean, I can't handle seeing, a squirrel or a hurt animal. And I've always been like that. And so for somebody like me, that's such an empath to others, to have created that tornado for somebody else, like, that's where I was, to the point where I was like, no, I can't go any further. I don't want to be on this earth anymore. But God, yes, is what came to me and said, no, there's a purpose for you in this. And so, yeah, the other Nicole was kind of a party girl and, hard work, burning the candle everywhere. Like, like we talked about, just my life was chaos. I thought it was organized chaos, and it wasn't. So the better version that I am of myself today, well, I'd say I'm the same person. It's just what's fine tuned, what now is really what I'm living in. And this is what I do. And everything that the young ladies that I work with today is, I make choices completely different. I had stinking thinking, I call it. I had irrational thoughts. I never thought I was above anybody because I, had learned early on what respect meant of others. But now if you take that into a bigger context, I didn't have the wherewithal to understand some of the consequences. I looked at it as, that's them over there. Those are criminals. Those are people that, You don't want walking through society. You don't want being your neighbor. Well, that is total hogwash. I learned completely different. And this is where I really changed inside in that prison time, is that I'm looking around at everybody stripped naked. You have everything, literally everything. I mean, you can't even turn on a light switch. You can't, somebody tells you when to go to the bathroom, what to eat. Like it's not supposed to be nice. It's beyond that. It's absolute hell. So I'm bonding with these women and learning what is it? We're all the same. It didn't matter if you had $1 in the bank or 1,000 in the bank. We were all there in our brokenness, all the same. And so that part of really going, okay, wait a minute, I need to understand humanity better.
Hey, Cold Red fans, Fitz here. Are you interested in a career in criminal justice? You've heard me talk about numerous cases I've worked over the years involving the scientific analysis of language known as forensic linguistics. Well, Pennsylvania Western University now has a fully accredited MA program, which I actually co-developed, where I teach forensic linguistics along with various other excellent professors too. This is the only forensic linguistic graduate program in the world which is both online and asynchronous. That means the courses are 100% on your schedule. We have professor video recordings, academic readings, and real-life case exercises posted weekly, and you can access any time to review and then complete the week's assignment. If you're interested in learning how written and spoken language can help solve crimes and get a master's degree at the same time, check out the Pennsylvania Western University's Forensic Linguistics program at www.pennwest.edu/justice.
I need to understand different cultures better. I mean, everything. And I literally submersed myself in just, you don't have anything. So you're laying down everything and you're just learning about people. And it was people from all walks of life, every ethnicity, every color, every religion, and you're living with them day to day, in and out in this environment. And that absolutely changed my perspective and opened my heart in a way that I didn't even know it could open about humanity and others.
Well, Nikki, was it not cultural shock when you were sentenced to by the judge? I think it was 10 years, right? For manslaughter, he sentenced you to 10 years, and then you walk in when they take you out. Well, tell me what happened there. Did they immediately put you in custody, or did you have time to report?
No, so I was on bond for 3 years, and that's where I took the time. I went to MAD, went to victim impact panels. I, did all my therapy. I did over 4,000 hours of therapy. I went to the church and did 2 different 6-month programs that the church offered. I mean, I really, leaned into that. So, and all the time I'm wearing ankle monitors, this monitor, that monitor, I mean, it was a whole world I was thrown into that I had no idea. Right. And in my head, now at that point, I still didn't really understand. So I'm still just thinking, oh my God, like I'm a first time quote offender here, which I hate that word, but that's what they call us in the system. And I'm thinking, this is nuts. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to do anything. At this point, I'm broke. I have no job, no house. Like, and my mom got dementia and just, it flipped on a dime. So I'm taking care of my mother, 24 hours a day with her dementia. And so it was a crazy time during that 3 years. It was also a beautiful time though. That's where I was able to really do a lot of healing work on myself. But then when we went, they came to me with a plea deal. It was a non-aggravated because of, various things. So you say 10 years, that's the sentence, but it wasn't an aggravated sentence. In Texas, it's not a 3G sentence. So, potentially you're looking at a maximum on that, usually around 5 years. But you can get out sooner. I made my first parole and was able to show everything that I'd done for those 3 years. The blessing of those 3 years was I had that opportunity. I could have gone one or two ways, either put the gun to my head and end it all, which I sat in a closet and looked at doing, or I could say, okay, I'm going to use this time and start trying to figure this out. What is this purpose? I mean, then Rusty Diamond and what I do today wasn't even born yet, right? I was just trying to heal me. I was just trying to get day by day as I'm caring for my sick mother too, and all the changes going on with my parents. But so that kind of evolved, and then they came with this plea deal, and at that point it was just whatever. Okay, It's time for me to do my time. I was the healthiest I've ever been in my life, physically, spiritually, emotionally. I married my best friend of 25 years who I dated off and on. And, I mean, I was just in the best position. I'd gotten rid of all of the external noise. Anybody that wasn't, for positive things in my life, boom, they were out. I was the healthiest. And so I was ready. And whatever that consequence was going to be, I was ready to take it. So they came to me with a plea deal, and I didn't even know what a plea. I'm sitting here Googling. I mean, I knew what it was from like TV shows and things like that. But here it is, me, and now it's But I didn't look at it as kind of my life. It was just, this is part of the process. This is part of the restitution. This is part of what I've got to do. So whatever it was, they came to me, said 10 years, non-aggravated. You could be out in a year and 3 months, probably going to be more like 2.5 years. And I said, okay, kissed my husband and the dogs. He took me and dropped me off at Dallas County. And the next thing I know was a complete whirlwind for 16 hours as I'm getting booked in and deliced and stripped and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm thrown in a pod at Dallas County Jail. And that's where what I do today was born. Literally within a week of me being there. I started calling these gals diamonds and started realizing what my purpose was very clear. My purpose was very clear. And whatever time it was that I was going to need to do, I was going to do, and I was going to do it well. And I was going to serve others. And that was the most important thing.
Well, tell us, before you go there, Jim, tell our listeners, what was it like? What was the defining moment when you're dropped off and you walk in and you're not seeing the day of light for could be 5 years? You have no idea, maybe 2 years, maybe 14 months, 15 months. You have no idea. And that door slams behind you. And some of the things that you had to experience that, a person like you has really never even, thought about something like that. But yet, what was it like to you to experience that, so our listeners could get an idea of what it was like?
It's shocking.
Nikki, if I can just say, you had Brookhaven, I guess, when you were 12 to 15 as a little bit of a background for this. So not everyone has that experience. So
True.
Continue.
That's very true. And it was very similar to that, where you expect to trust the staff. Like I went in thinking, and I had done a going to prison seminar. I'd read the books. I'd already read the rule book. So I knew every rule. I'd memorized it. I knew how to go from this program to that program. I wanted to get every everything I could do. So none of that even prepared me. The second those doors close, and now county jail is different than prison, but when you're waiting to pull chain, it's a little different because all the staff knows, oh, she's got a big number on her, they call it. So you get treated differently than somebody maybe waiting to go to a trial or somebody that's just doing a few months. So it was very, very enlightening. And you have male staff, you're naked, and there's male staff. The showers come to here, and where are women's parts? Everything's built for a man. And so it's not built for women. So basic needs like, feminine hygiene products. I mean, I'd already been through menopause, but these young girls that I'm watching trying to make tampons out of toilet paper because there's no pads, no, it was everything. The food, you can't even call it food. And I know it's not supposed to be anything nice, but I mean, if our taxpayer dollars, whether you like it or not, are going towards this kind of thing, like it wouldn't even, you don't even treat dogs in a pound that way. And I never would do that with a dog either. It was so shocking. I remember the very first thing I thought that first night as I was on my bed praying, and I borrowed somebody's Bible because, all the things they told you couldn't anyway. So I didn't even have a Bible. And so I'm sitting there praying and trying to read this Bible, and there's a, officer sitting in the middle of the pod, and all these girls on all these metal bunks. And I just remember hearing Jeremiah, for I know the plans I have for you. And, it really resonated with me to just think, okay, kind of almost out of body experience because it's so shocking. And I'm sitting there thinking, my dad, belongs to a country club and these things and that. none of that matters. And none of that has any weight in life, zero, when you truly lose your freedom. For me, it goes God, freedom, then my family, and it's got to be in that order. If that order's out of whack, I can kind of tell. I never respected my freedom to be an American, my rights to be free, to turn on a light switch, to go to the bathroom, to get something to eat. I had no idea, just the little things, to smell the outside air, to feel grass, to eat a piece of lettuce. There's none of that. And so I knew that it was not going to be pleasant by any stretch, and nor should it be. We've set up the system to be so punishment. It's not rehabilitation, it's just punishment. I had no idea that it was also the reverse. It was the staff I was scared of. It was not the police out here. I'm talking about, correctional officers. The people that I thought I was going to lean towards and look for and be like, oh my God, I'm so scared of the quote criminals. That's what changed for me day one. I've never been treated by authority the way I was treated both in Dallas County Jail and even worse in prison. The way the reverse racism, the things about my body parts, what you doing in here looking like you, and then it goes from there into all this crazy stuff as you're standing there naked, bending over and coughing. It is the most degrading, humiliating experience. I mean, it is not just about punishment. It is truly, a lot of people have power that shouldn't, and they wield it in a very awful way. And guess what? 95% of us that go in those doors come back out, and we're living next to you. And I'm seeing you at the grocery store. I'm seeing you at the gas station. We're living in these times right now because of it. So I was just shocked at the fact that it is such a broken. I trusted the system. Even though I screwed up and I got to be a part of the system, I always thought, okay, the system's going to be fair. Yeah, there's going to be some things here or there. I'd lived in corporate. I'd been in schools. I knew how things were supposed to function. Yet you bring up Brookhaven. Thank God I'd had that experience, because I don't know that I would have made it when I got down to the actual prison. I had to start kind of back over again because it was even more traumatizing and horrific. So I did have that kind of survival mode to pull from, if you will. But I was shocked, and people don't know. And this is what I talk to, friends, anybody that will listen. Like, we want accountability. We need law and order to function as society. We need responsibilities. And what happens? Just when you're a child, even you break mom's vase, you get punished. She tells you not to touch something, and you touch it, you get punished, right? I mean, there is an element of that, and it's not very popular amongst, people that are maybe in advocacy and things with prison reform. But I'm not an abolitionist. I think the whole system needs to be redone where we can actually, rehabilitate people. But there does need to be a semblance of how do we hold somebody accountable, right, for their actions, and how do we navigate what those actions were and what is appropriate in order to not only have restitution for victims and families and people that have been traumatized on that side of it. And then, that line of victim and victimization is razor thin. That's another thing. I had no idea. These aren't a bunch of people in prison sitting there looking at you going, hey, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to steal from you. I'm going to. No, not at all. It's these horrible stories of poverty, abuse, drug use, addiction. I mean, I could tell you stories that just make your toes curl. Well, I'm sure you guys have seen, especially you, Ray, but I had no idea what society really is living with, the kind of pain and brokenness that our humanity is facing, that it's like, okay, that doesn't negate what somebody does, right? It doesn't say, okay, I'm going to absolve somebody from that, me included. But what it should do is allow us to maybe approach it a little differently, especially if we expect people to get out and live amongst us.
Nikki, just so people understand, county prisons throughout most of the U.S., they're for usually misdemeanor charges, and they may be sentenced to 2 years or less, and also people awaiting trial being held, without bail, or they can't make bail. So you spent some time there, it sounds like, early on, than maybe as a progression down the line. But the prison you went to, was it a maximum, minimum security? Were you in there with some lifers who were never getting out? I'm just curious. And were there some alpha females among you that you knew who kind of ruled the roost, I'll say, using that analogy? And you had to do it, you had to survive some too in that regard. You were definitely different, I have no doubt, than most of the other inmates in there with your background. But how did the system itself work that way? Minimum, maximum, some real bad people in there, etc.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great question, and I get asked that a lot, especially when people look at me and they go, "You went to prison?" I'm like, "Let me tell you a story. Yes, I did. I don't hide from it. I don't run. Obviously, look, I put myself out here, especially with what I went to prison for. I mean, I get hate. I get go kill yourself. You're a psycho. I get all kinds of stuff. That is noise. It is so much more important to have these kind of conversations. And for somebody that, like me, can sit in front of a House representative, a senator, a businessman, a mom down the street and say, hey, this is your concern. You do care about this. And let me tell you why and what I learned and what I saw. Yes, of course, there's an element of criminality. There were people I was never scared because I had God. I walked around with my Bible and I was Miss Diamond from the moment. They all knew I was Rusty Diamond instantly, and that just had a respect level. But I did have somebody try to attack me in a kitchen, and a girl took her down. Thank God she did, because she was coming at me with a skillet. Even though they're attached to the ceiling, she was bonking me on the head with that thing, and I don't know if I'd have made it through that one. So yeah, and she just didn't like it that I had raised up the ranks and was now running the line, so to speak, where the food was, being slopped out. So bottom line is there was an element, and yes, there were lifers in there, and I met quite a few. And when you went on chain, as it was called, and they chained you, both your wrists, your ankles, and then you to another girl as you're carrying a potato sack with every single thing you own, period, your books, your food, your underwear, your bra, like everything was in this thing, and you're chained to somebody. It was always from multiple units. So you always interacted with people of all different security levels. Now, I never went to SEG. Some of my diamonds did go, the gals in there did go to SEG. I worked SEG as far as the kitchen, so I would take the kitchen trays, so I saw it. Now, of course, I know it from a completely different perspective from the women that I, coach and counsel. But
just so we know, SEG is segregation as opposed
to
general pop or general population.
Correct. So I was not on a maximum security prison. I did go to them when we were taking people in this big bus and dropping them off. I was chained to girls. The last day I was in prison, God made sure I even wanted to get it on the way out. I was in a cell with a girl who had done 35 years for murder. And finding her story out was just unbelievable. Of course, it was a man involved, and I won't get into kind of my thoughts on it. But anyway, and she was very young at the time. But she started telling me about her 35, I could cry, and telling me about her 35 years and what she experienced in the prison system, through all those years. It's not what even people that have charges. David Gerlach was on here, a good friend of mine now, my brother, a murder charge. Listen to his story, listen to what happened. Again, like with mine, it doesn't absolve it, but it helps you understand. Well, you made a comment that there's probably not people like me. Oh yeah, there's the whole prison just about is full of people like me. It is not what you think. And we are not who we see ourselves out here in the real world as, with our material items, with our things, right? When all that is stripped from you, you are all on even playing field. I mean, one little thing, maybe commissary might be a little different. Somebody gets it or not, but heck, you just share it with everybody and be communal and everybody gets something. But you're all the same. Now, do you look maybe different? Do you have cultural difference? Absolutely. But in there's this different thing that happens when you're locked behind a door that you can't open and windows that you can't see. and there's nothing, and you live under the constant threat of violence from COs, from staff, from other inmates to each other. It is a very different bond that you form where you really get to know who people are. And that's what I mean about humanity. I used to be for the death penalty. I thought, okay, you go out there and purposefully go slaughter and murder somebody and do these horrible, even now, I don't care what the crime is. Like, I completely changed my stance on the death penalty once I really understood. Now, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be locked away off the street, never see the light of day. But my whole perspective about our responsibility to each other as humans, it's not our place to judge it. That's God's. There's a court and then there's God. That's it. It's ours to say, what can we do the best with what we've got? And if we're not doing our best, how do we continue to grow and make that better? Most of the people that I interacted also too in there just really didn't have those simple of thoughts. You mean, wait a minute, I can lead a different life and I can get out of this snowball, as Ray called it earlier, that I'm in by just making some different choices? How do I do that? And just giving people the resources and the tools. Most of my time, even today, with the girls that are, is spent just resources. We take for granted I can pick up a phone and I know how to Google, okay, I'm going to find help for single mothers with children, state-sponsored programs, right? I'm going to get my food stamps. A lot of people don't understand that. They don't know. So education is so critical, and just being able to help people just see just even a few tweaks in your life, before you get into the deep stuff, even dealing with traumas and addictions and all that, just understanding you can have a better life, and you can hustle, and you can hustle for good. I teach a lot of my gals that have robberies, right? Even armed robberies. And these are sweet girls. Like, you pulled a gun on a guy in a store, and what if that had gone wrong and you'd have killed him? Then what? Or the guy you were with killed him, and you were present. How do you do that? How do you live with yourself? Just like in my situation, right? Well, they don't think about it that way till you offer them, maybe, have you thought about it like this? Do you value your own life? We're living in a world of so many people that are truly mentally ill, but they can be helped. And so they don't value their own life because they're like, my life sucks. If I go to prison, I go to prison. If I die, I die. If I kill somebody, that sucks. And it's like, whoa, where does that come from? What's the root of that? Why do you think that way? And why do you think it can't be anything better, bigger, or different? I mean, in our world out here, what sets us apart is the go-getters, right? There's so many people that come up from poverty or, from very difficult circumstances. I mean, a lot of people say, well, I had trauma in my childhood and I didn't go out and kill somebody, or I had this and I didn't do that. Well, we're all individuals. Thank God you didn't. But what'd you do to make that change? You knew to make that change, or you would. Because hurt people, period, end of story. I mean, that is an adage that is truer than time.
Nikki, you served about 15 months. And
450 days on the nose.
So close to 15 months, and a lot of people would probably say you got off pretty easy. How do you respond to that?
I hope everything I just said is that I didn't get off easy. It's torture, it's trauma, it's hell. And here's where I also changed my beliefs in how do we reconcile accountability and a timeout and punishment for one's actions versus the reality. A day in there, it's like what it was like in Brookhaven. A day in prison is like a month out here. I can't describe what happens to time. We don't have clocks. We don't know the times. We're trying to look at COs, or if somebody is lucky enough to be grandfathered in with a watch, or it's like a nightmare casino, right? All the noise but there's no fun winning, gambling, or going to see a show. But it's like a casino. You don't really know what time it is and all of that. So to couple that experience and what you're experiencing day to day and how time is just what you're missing out here. People get it. If they're going to get it, they're going to get it very quickly. I got it on my first day. Had I had that experience before, maybe when I'd had some hiccups or done a little, like, that would be like, whoa, this is what this is. It's not like just prison where you kind of, do your thing and do this, that. No. So, I mean, bottom line is there's no amount of time, first off, to ever replace somebody else's life. There's no amount of time or restitution for that. What there is that something has hopefully impacted the individual that perpetrated it enough to say, time out. Now I'm going to do something about this and do something differently. And with some aid and some help along the way, odds are pretty good that they can. So I don't really look at it as, okay, you got off easier, this happened or that. What I did with it is what matters. Whether it was I was in a day or 10 years. The end result there, right, is hopefully that now you're a positive member in society, contributing to society. And I did pay a huge restitution debt. I mean, I still can't sit with my back to a door, loud noises, clanking. I don't sleep. I have, like, I don't know if you can see, I have these weird swellings and things on my hands that I got from prison and working in the kitchen. I mean, I've been to doctors. I've had CT scans for the stuff with my eyes. I mean, it's what it does to your health. I mean, because there's no healthcare in there. It's a joke. Had I not been who I was, I wouldn't have made it through it. So I don't think that the time is what matters as much as I got it. I experienced it. I'm living with that still today, but now I have the tools to deal with that trauma, and it doesn't affect me like it did before. But the point of that is, that's me. A lot of people don't have that. Sadly, more than about 60 to 70% of my girls go back in. They don't know how to live out here. They don't know how to feel like it's okay to live out here. I mean, it really does some things to your self-worth. Am I worthy to even be on this planet? Am I worthy to be alive? Am I worthy to have some of my rights restored? It's just, it's something for the rest of my life. It's just a constant, evolution of it, but I'm never going to be completely out of prison. Once you've been to prison, you're always going to have some part of you still a part of that. It's that changing. It is that much of an experience.
Nikki, there's a term called institutionalization, and some of the women you described, that's what they are. And of course, it happens to men too. They're just so used to and almost comfortable in the prison environment that it's not that big of a deal to go back, and they feel more comfortable there than they actually do inside. So we want to kind of bring this, to a conclusion here, and I want to hear about the Rusty Diamond Network. But before we get, and you've referenced that a few times already, and some of the good work you're doing there. But we talked about the first, 16 hours when you were in there, the doors slamming behind you, the body searches, all that stuff. What was the first 24 to 48 hours out in July of 2019? You're out the door. Did you have to go to a halfway house or anything like that, or could you go right? Could you go right home or with someone? So how did that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did all the programming. Now, keep in mind, too, I jumped in and immediately was in programs. I mean, I got into a program in Dallas called Resolana. Ended up being my uncle was one of the people behind it, and I had no idea. But I made sure to stay prayed up, programmed up, so I was constantly in those things. So I didn't really miss too much of a beat in making sure that I was still doing work on myself in a, teacher-led or therapist-led kind of environment. So for me, first I lost one of our dogs passed away while I was inside. My cousin got brain cancer. Fortunately I got to see him when I got out. But that first moment, we have it on video. I have two videos. I have one of my husband literally pulling up. He was pulling up to the prison, and me getting in the car and the doors wouldn't open. And I'm going, unlock the door. The guard's standing there. She's like, get in the car, get in the car, get in the car. And I'm like, my husband's trying to get the doors to unlock in the car. And then just that first moment where I was just like, please take me to Sonic. I just need a real Coke and a cheeseburger. And it was around the corner. He's like, well, we're getting out of this town first. And it was just that first feeling of like, so this is what it is out here, you know? And still to this day, there's not a second that goes by that I don't recall that feeling and remind myself of that. And that I have that blessing to appreciate my freedom in a way that most people don't. You take it for granted. Even if you don't think you take it for granted, you do. I guarantee you, you do until you lose it. And so every day I remind myself of what it felt like those first, couple of days. And it was quiet. I took a bath. And then I, bathed my dogs and played with my dogs and slept. I hadn't slept, at all. It's loud, it's bright, it's clanking, it's constant count. They wake you up. You can't sleep. They wake you up every hour to make sure you're there in the bed if it's nighttime. So it was just, and seeing my family and my friends and the people that had supported me. I had such a village, so many amazing people that I had been friends with for, 30 years since I was a baby. My parents' friends, like it does take a village. And I'm definitely one of those that I need that village and it's important to have. And so I spent that time with them.
This Rusty Diamond, where'd that name come from?
Well, hopefully everybody's old enough to remember CBs, like in truckers had. Mm-hmm. Well, back in the day, we didn't have phones, and we had a lake house or a ranch up in Oklahoma. And this is in the 80s. And it would be me and my sister and my mom, all three blondes in a big old Cadillac. My dad's very old school, and my mom didn't want to have a gun in the car with the kids. So he put a CB in her car and said, you get on that CB. And that's how we're going to communicate. And he had some kind of system where he had a CB in his office at the hospital and at the house. And also, too, we could communicate with truckers. So my mom would get on that CB and say, breaker, breaker 19, Rusty Diamond coming in hot to Oklahoma from Texas. And I was like, oh, that's so perfect. Because my mom passed away right before I went to prison in 2017 after a very difficult dementia. And my father just passed away this past July from dementia. I've been a caregiver for 14 years. And, I'm an only child now. So I've cared for both of these parents. And so anyway, Rusty Diamond, it was just fitting that it was my mom. My mom is the most sweet, kind, loving, gentle soul. And that's kind of where I felt like I had evolved to with, humanity and the women that I wanted to support. And a diamond is formed under pressure, right? It's the hardest thing. Mm-hmm. That's how I was formed, under pressure. That's how my girls are formed, under pressure. And we got a little rust on us, right? And I call the men rusty nails. So they're strong, they're men, they're resilient, they're, but we got some rust on us, and that's okay. It's if we don't look at ourselves and say, okay, I need to work on this, or there's some rust on me here or there, then we got bigger problems. But so that's where Rusty Diamond came from, and the girls are called diamonds, and the men are called nails, and it just has been a perfect fit.
So this Rusty Diamond Network, what does it do? And is it successful?
I'm the first diamond. It's successful.
Okay.
You're the Hope Diamond.
There you go.
Good, Jim. But I do like that diamond. The Hope Diamond. Well, I'm a hope dealer. I really am. That's what I do, is say, look, you might look at me and think, oh, she had it easy, or she was rich, or no, quite the opposite. And I had to work hard and get to where I've gotten on my own. And for these girls to see that in me and learn that and be like, wait, I can have that too. So yeah, it is hope. And sometimes, we just need that faith and hope in order to get by. And then let's go past getting by. Let's start looking at self-esteem and am I worthy, and how do I have just responsibility for myself. And this is where the girls, it's really important with Rusty Diamond Network and what I do. I empower, encourage, and enlighten these women. They do it on their own. I don't do it for them. I'm a tough mama love because I know that's how I respond well too. Call me out on my crap. Don't, I'm not going to sit over here and just kind of, pander to somebody. They have to do it for themselves. I always say it's like a bowling alley, right? When you put up the little bumper guards for the kids, they've still got to roll the ball, but you're just kind of giving them a little bit of a soft landing from the gutter. That's what I do with Rusty Diamond Network. And so
They put those gutter pads up for Jim too when he bowls.
That's good. I like that. You're going to hear about that one later, I'm sure.
I will.
And if you look in the back of Ray's head, there's 2 holes there, and that would actually work very well to knock some pins down.
I can see that visual. But Rusty Diamond is really about hope. Now, granted, do we do all the resources? And I learned everything myself. Nobody taught me. Everybody said there's reentry. That is total BS. There is not reentry. And what are we reentering to and from? I never left. I'm in a timeout, but I'm still connected to society, and I'm going to be, no matter
Ray,
what. 95%
there?
of people get out, even the ones that don't.
No, you're frozen too.
They're still a human being, right? And so the problem is we just throw everybody into these violent environments, violent people. Now the authority has all the power and uses it, and there are some good COs. I'm not going to say they're not, but the majority and the way that they operate is by total fear. And it's very different for the women than the men, I must say. The men don't have a lot of the experience because they get together and can kind of grieve things and push things a little bit. But, bottom line is Rusty Diamond Network is working inside the prison to actually reintegrate that person, from the get-go and not just 6 months, before they get out, if they're even lucky to get something before they get out. And then we help them and support them once they're out, whether it's, where they live. I work with parole. I go before the parole board. I do parole hearings. Even if something happens and goes south, hopefully we can stop things from progressing and get them the help that they need. But clothing, even children, families, we work with the parents while they're incarcerated. We work with husbands or wives. I mean, it's just whatever needs to be, we're a jack of all trades, whatever needs to be done to help ensure that somebody is, supported and gets the resources and the tools to, do it for themselves, but just gets that guidance down that bowling lane. That's what Rusty Diamond Network does.
Now, do I have to be, just so you know, Jim lost his internet. I don't know what happened. He lives down along the beach. I don't know if he's at the beach or he's somewhere down around Annapolis, but
I think I want to go there. We should have done this there.
I hear you. I hear you. But anyways, does the person that is going to be serviced by your organization, the Rusty Diamond Network, do they have to be in prison or can they be out of prison and then come to you, even if they're like in trouble outside, or is it just for those that are in prison getting ready to be relocated outside?
No, it's everybody. And I mean, I work with some of the county jails around here. I'm not allowed to go into them. It's crazy. The people that are closest to the problem are usually closest to the solution, right? Yet I can't go in. But I do work with them from a certain level with the women that they've got to potentially help stop them from going to prison. But my model is that we work with them while they're inside and we stay with them. There's no other organization that does that where we're partnered up with them. And I do that because I'm not a technical volunteer with the Texas prisons, even though I go in and I speak and I've done graduations. I go in with another nonprofit. I've also made sure to keep the organization grassroots. The girls run it, own it. My husband, God love him, he has provided for it. We don't travel and do vacations. No, we do Rusty Diamond. We go buy furniture for girls. I do a thing here on the Nextdoor app in our neighborhood. Hey, we need clothes. We need for this kid or for that. So no, they can come anytime. I've got ones that I was still on their phone list. I haven't talked to them in 3 years. I just got a girl that called me out of the blue. I said, I don't have a girl in that unit right now. And it was a girl that I had helped years ago. And she found herself back with a guy and back into drugs. And here she is with her parole revoked. And sadly, I probably could have helped her so we could have avoided that. Maybe. I'm not a fixer. You've got to fix it. You've got to be responsible, just like I have to be responsible and accountable to myself. But what I can do is network you. I can network the people together that hopefully can help for the betterment of this person. Are they going to be, better served to be out here being a mom? 80% are mothers of women. Are they going to be better served to get help, treatment, or you know what? Do they sadly have to go? There's a 6-month deal where sometimes they'll send them to and give them a slap on the wrist and say, okay, don't do this again, or we're going to revoke your parole. So there's all kinds of things. But yes, we will help in any way, shape, or form. I've had two girls that have had babies while they've been in prison as well. That's a whole other scenario. I was actually chained to one in a van going to the prison myself, and there's no seatbelts, and this girl is out to here 6 months, pregnant, rolling around in the back of a metal tube. It was quite scary. So yeah, whatever the resources and whatever people need, and if I can't help, I use all of my skill set and my old hustle in sales and in software and all those things that I did to go find it. I don't know, but I might know a guy, or a guy might know a guy, and then we just start calling. Or, Twitter, now X, has been great for us too. We put out a call out there. Hey, we need to go fund or raise some money, for XYZ. And man, the people support, and that gives me hope. And that encourages me for all the crap that I get, for all of the negativity, the things in my inbox, or the things that people are trolling. Man, I get so much positive and so good, and I see the good in people. And that's where I want to stay.
It's outstanding. I tell you, I am so impressed with your story, Nikki. You were on top of the world at one point. Tragedy struck, not just you, but another family. And we talk about Mr. Armstrong and his family. And I know that you're trying to pay it forward every day. And my hat's off to you. And I'm glad to say that I got the chance to meet you and get to know you, and that I wish you the best. I know that you have an organization. It's Rusty Diamond, RUSTYDIAMOND.org. That's your website, and there's a lot of ways to help. You just don't have to go out and talk to people. There's so many ways to help, donations and things of that nature that will help. And you never know how much, or what you do, how much it really helps someone else. Is there any other organizations or any other things that you want to talk about while we're here in reference to doing this? I know we've taken up quite a bit of your time so far. Anything else that you want to add to this, Nikki?
I've just been so impressed. I do. I work with so many different organizations here because, right, I'm the networking. I bring them all together, and I don't house all the resources over here in the corner, right? So these organizations that I work with, I have never been so impressed. My mom was involved in charity work her whole life. I mean, that's what she did. She started so many of the charities here in Dallas. I grew up in what charity and nonprofit is until I got into the side of criminal justice, mental health, addiction, this kind of umbrella. Man, these people, I thought I knew people that were generous and kind, and they are. I'm not knocking other, kind of segments of the nonprofit industry, but man, talk about blood, sweat, and tears, because there's such little reward. There is such little reward. It is from a one-on-one from your client or somebody you're working. So these organizations that provide shelter and are these critical, important things are just amazing. And so many of them offer, programs that are, and I hate to use the word programs because it's a lifestyle. A program means you can stop, start. A lifestyle means it is something you act on every day. So I'm just really amazed by this community and the advocacy and the passion that people have. And from prison wives to, I do a radio show. It's one of the oldest shows. Actually, I think it is the longest running radio show in Texas. And it's every Friday night. And I'm on every 6 weeks. And they do shout outs to the people in prison that can hear them. So the wife is, on there calling in and saying, hey, I miss you. And the guy's sitting in there listening to it. And it's just so amazing to see the impact and the advocacy and people like David. There's so many great people. Topeka K. Sam, I went through quite a few programs through Epic Ambassador, and, just amazing people that are really working hard to make this world safer I mean, in the end, that's really what it is. Healthier people make a healthier community.
Yeah,
Period. End of story.
I agree.
It's that simple.
I agree. I agree. I really do agree, Nick. I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight. I'd love to have you back back in the future, and have you come back and talk about some of the positive things that Rusty Diamond Network continues to do and some of the success stories. And if you have anybody that's a success story out there, let us know. We'd love to have them come on here and share their experiences and how they turned it around. Because you know what, Nikki, we're firm believers here. We talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly here, but there's good, bad, and ugly with you too. But the good always outshines the bad and the ugly. It always does. Good always wins over evil.
It
It
does.
always does with that. And I
Amen.
always say, and I know you found God, and I always say that Jesus, is not so much concerned about the 99 sheep that are in his corral. He's looking for that one that's lost and trying to bring it back in. And there's more joy in heaven when one comes back in that has been lost than for all the other 99 that are there. And you know what? I think you were that was 99 in there, and you were the one that was lost. And I think they brought you back. And I commend you on that because you're providing a service to a lot of people that people kind of forget about.
Yeah.
And people don't really look at too much. And you know what? You're right. I mean, there's a thing to say, and you say, well, what about all these people that are in prison? Well, the heck with them. Well, you know what? You're right. Eventually, those people, 95, probably more than that percent, are going to be released. And what do you do then with them? What happens to them? They're your neighbors. They're in the store, the gas station. You're so right about that. Listen, is there anything else you want to add before I sign us off here, Nick?
No, but you're making me tear up. How about next time I get to ask you a bunch of fun FBI questions?
Yeah, we could do that. We could turn the tables. You got
Turn
it.
the tables.
We could turn the tables.
To hear stories.
Well, yeah, I got a lot of those. I have a lot of those. Well, listen, we want you to subscribe to Cold Red Podcast and follow us on all Cold Red Podcast social media platforms and coldredpodcast.com. Thank you to our music composer, Rick Schilling. Thank you to our producers, Matt Robinson and Matt McLaughlin. And we'll see you next week with another incredible guest. Until then, stay safe and be aware of your surroundings. It
Amen.
just might save your life. Bye, everybody.